Hi, it's Russell from Dambuster here. I'm just going to run through a really common question that is, lots of plumbers and building designers and architects ask us all the time. Now, the question relates to the DTS component of a box gutter system, which is in the instance of the Dambuster products, and in particularly this one here, which is our common TSO outlet. The box gutter coming in to this is actually DTS. Now, for those, give a little reminder that DTS means deemed to satisfy, and it's achieved by sizing that box gutter to AS 3500-3, which is the DTS standard within the National Construction Code Volume 3. So easier said than done, because if you go to AS 3500-3, you can find yourself buried in the general method for sizing box cutters, which has numerous steps. I think it ranges from 11 to 17 steps that you have to run through to size that box gutter there and any downstream devices. And also, the DTS methods have a whole bunch of graphs which you need to interpret and work through, a lot of formulas. It's quite a significant process. It has to be done for each and every single installation. My experience in this industry is that whenever I ask plumbers, did they carry out a DTS method for sizing their box cutters, the answer is no. I guessed it. So I guessed it because it worked last time. Now that's all fine and well until you come across that unusual building somewhere with a higher flow rate than you're used to, or there's roofs dropping into roofs and compounding all over the building, and suddenly these things get really, really complicated and difficult. So at Dambuster, whilst the upstream box gutter is not necessarily our problem, it's your problem, we made this easy for you because in creating the Dambuster system, we had to understand the Australian standards really well, and we were able to look at the various graphs in there and the general method and simplify that for people, which we thought was a really good idea, given that helps our products to be utilized correctly out there in the real world. So the places to go to on our website, and I'm just going to point you in the direction of this, is you go onto the Dambuster Rainheads website, you go to the technical download section, and then you scroll down until you find, let's go to the quick design guide, which is the one that when people ask me these questions, that's where I find myself going most of the time. So I go to the quick design section and it runs through how to size a box gutter for any location in Australia. So the first thing you have to determine is that you need to know where you are and what the flow rate for that particular place is. Now, that's pretty straightforward because it's worked out from longitude and latitude, but I'm going to make it really easier for you. And I'm just going to choose Melbourne as an example. So the postcode for Melbourne has a flow rate of 187 millimeters per hour. So that's worked out by the Bureau and put into the Australian standards, 187 millimeters per hour. And what that's telling you is that you can expect in a once in 100 year period, or a 1% AEP, that particular site could be subjected to rainfall which was equivalent to that. Now that would equate to 15.6 millimeters of rainfall in 5 minutes. So that's how it works out. That's really, really quite a lot. Interestingly, a once in 1 year rainfall in the postcode of Melbourne would be 5 millimeters in 5 minutes. So what you can see straight away is there's not a huge difference between once in 100 and once in 1 year rainfall. And so it's simply 3 times the amount. So when you are out there in November in Melbourne around Cup weekend and you get those heavy downpours, what you're probably looking at is a once in 1 year rain event. And we get a lot of problems with buildings in and around those downpours. But a once in 100 year rain event is 3 times that amount. So probably the one you're used to having, it's 3 times that amount. And so it causes a lot more problems. But box gutters need to be able to keep buildings safe, even in really, really heavy rainfall. The way box cutters do that is quite kind of interesting, okay? And not many people seem to understand this, but a box gutter, just because it's had a once in 100 year rainfall doesn't mean if it has a once in 101 year rainfall, that it's going to fail. And that's the reason is because box cutters are created with what's called freeboard built into them. So there's actually a safety measure built into the box cutter, which is quite significant. In the instance of a box cutter running to a rain head, we know that that safety measure is actually 60 mil. So what it means is, if I'm looking at this box cutter here, there's a 60 millimeter safety in the box cutter, which the flow rate will never exceed, even in a once in 100 year rain event. And when we come across buildings flooding all the time during this, there's only really two reasons why they flood. They don't have enough freeboard, so enough left over when it's raining really heavily. And secondly, the overflow provision downstream is not good enough. So they're the things you really have to be careful of. The actual sizing of the box cutters can be made really easy. And like I say, if you go to the quick design guide, you just need to learn how to create how to size the flow rate coming in into liters per second, and then the world is your oyster. Our products are all geared around liters per second. Once you know that common factor, you can size the downstream devices, and you can really, really easily size box cutters. What I say to people is, if you're in Melbourne, the flow rates, as I mentioned before, the city CBD is 187 millimeters per hour. Down the surf coast, it's going to be a little bit less. In the north of the city, sometimes it can be higher, around 195, say Montmorency, 195, and then it tails away again as you go down the peninsula. So what you will find is that if you look through the Australian standards, say the 2021 version, in the appendices regarding rainfall charts, you won't find any data for any suburb in Melbourne that exceeds 200 millimeters per hour. Outside Melbourne, you'll find that the highest rate that you can get is 237 millimeters up in Orbost, and so actually it's Mallacoota that's 200. And so really the flow rates in Victoria never exceed 240 millimeters per hour, and in the Melbourne metropolitan area, 200 millimeters per hour. So I'm going to simplify it and say that most of you are working metropolitan areas. So if you go metropolitan area for Melbourne, 200 millimeters per hour. Sydney obviously going to be different, higher. Same with Brisbane. But let's just talk Melbourne at the moment. So you choose 200 millimeters per hour as your flow rate, which straight away means you don't have to do all the calculations, work it out suburb by suburb, and then you times that by the square area of the roof, which I'm sure all of you can work out. Now that throws you out a great big number. Now that number, remember, is giving it to you in millimeters per hour, and you need liters per second. So the way that we change that is by dividing it by 3,600, which sounds confusing, but it's actually just how many seconds there are in an hour. So you times the square area by the flow rate, 200 millimeters, and divide by 3,600. Now, if you do this just off the top of your head, just go 58 square meters times 200 millimeters per hour, divide by 3,600, and you're going to get a flow rate, for the minimum sort of flow area of a roof, just over 3 liters per second. Okay, so once you have that number, you can go to the Dambuster charts, which are in our quick design guide, starting on page 8 and running on from there, which will give you the size, it's this fantastic graph. And if you know how many liters per second is running through a device, and you know how wide your box cutter is, that's, in this instance it's 450 mil wide, it might be 300 mil wide, 200 millimeters wide. You simply look across, find out on the graph, and it gives you the minimum measurement upstream, including the freeboard. Then you simply add, if you're doing 1 in 200 full, you add 5 millimeters for every meter that you go downstream. That gives you your downstream measurement. So you've got your upstream measurement and your downstream measurement. And really at that point there, you can size your box cutters incredibly well, and then they adapt to our devices on the downstream end. And you don't have to do anything much with our devices because they're geared about flowing into that flow rate that you're determining from your drawings. So enabling you to do the DTS component really easily, that's like one of the huge benefits of using the Dambuster system. And secondly, having a predictable and reusable and scalable product which enables you to be compliant and build the type of buildings that people are asking you to work on.